just start off by saying good afternoon to everyone and thank you for coming to the IABC monthly meeting. Tonight we have three prominent guests that we are going to be discussing some of the issues that have been going on in the industrial area and just outside the industrial area in the Village of Mamaroneck. As you know, we've had our ups and downs, and we're right in the middle right now. We think we're starting to see the light that's at the end of the tunnel as things are starting to progress. But the IABC is a group of business owners that got together and we're fighting to try to retain and rebuild the values of our properties. In the last 4 or 5 years, many of you can vouch for this, our property values, our property values have plummeted. And the only end in sight for us is to see this project go through. Now, we understand that this project is actually going to be starting in 2 weeks, it's yet to be seen, but they're starting with the bridges, which is a big, big starting point. So we have a bunch of questions posed for our guests. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Paul Noto, and Paul, if you would lead us with some questions.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'm Paul Noto. I'm the attorney. I represent IABC, and I thank you for being here. I'm going to be your moderator tonight. And we do have some really great people here, people I've worked with for years in various capacities. So let me introduce them, starting at my immediate right, Senator Shelley Mayer. Senator Mayer is from Yonkers. She has served as counsel to the New York State Senate for many years, and then she went on to become a state assembly person representing Yonkers and southern Westchester before being elected to the state Senate, representing a big chunk of Westchester. Your district runs from Yonkers to Bedford. Now Bridgetown. Okay, so that's a pretty extensive and very diverse district. So I know that it's a challenging job. Steve Otis, to her right, is I served as counsel to Senator Susie Oppenheimer for many, many years. Then he was elected mayor of Rye City, and of course I'm partial to mayors, and so he did a great job there for many years. And then he went on to be elected himself to the state assembly, representing the Sound Shore, I think, running from Port Chester to New Rochelle, correct? And to his right, Catherine Parker is our county legislator, also from the city of Rye. So if you want to get elected, you want to be from Rye. So Rye. Otis is from Rye. Catherine Parker is from Rye. So it's a pretty yes. And Catherine has been in the county legislature since 2014, representing Rye, Mamaroneck Village, Mamaroneck Town, Larchmont, and parts of Harrison and New Rochelle. Also a pretty diverse district. And having been a former legislator, I can tell you that's a very challenging job as well. So we thank you for being here, and we are really grateful because the IABC has been around for a little over a year now, and this is a coalition of business owners and property owners in the industrial area. And you know, this type of organization could exist in any number of towns and villages and cities that you already represent. In the village, you know, sometimes the people who run the businesses and own the businesses can't vote in the community in which they have a business, and so there's always a feeling that elected officials are less responsive to them. And you know, that's an important issue for this group. We've been very fortunate that our village and town officials have come and met with us and talked about these important issues. And we know that in your capacities, you are very much involved in the flooding issues that really are critical to this organization. So we want very much that for you to perceive us and to be business friendly, and we think that we will see many similarities between the village of Mamaroneck and business community and the other areas that you represent. So with that, let's get on to our questions. I think what we'll do is we'll throw out a question, and then you can each, since you each have separate areas of jurisdiction, you can take turns answering. Since obviously Senator Mayer and some of the notice are from the state, and Legislator Parker is from the county. So sometimes you think, you know, someone has complete jurisdiction. It's not always the case. There are different lanes people have to operate. So our first question is related to flood mitigation. The ACE plan, that's the Army Corps of Engineers plan that I suspect you've heard of, is is a major step forward in terms of flood mitigation in the village. And your support is well known and well documented. It will be a few years before the project is complete, and in the interim, the village will still be vulnerable to catastrophic flooding. So our questions are, will you help look for other ways to mitigate flooding beyond the scope of the Army Corps plan? Will you assist in getting additional funding when money is set aside for the plan runs out? Will you help Mamaroneck confront the municipality, not use the term confront, work with the other municipalities in the 25 square mile radius around us to put in place stronger measures for stormwater management and river maintenance? And is there any update on the status of the village's dredging permits? This is for the LMC.
I mean, and actually, I think all of us are involved in all of these things, so, but I'd like to take a step back. I mean, I have been to the floods, all the floods that have occurred down here, been down here when they've happened. Even before I was elected to the assembly, I worked for Susie Oppenheimer for 28 years, so that means I've received 50 years of flood history in car rides back and forth to Albany with Susie, and I've been to a few decades worth of meetings, local meetings dealing with the Army Corps stuff, and so I share the frustration of wanting to get the work going and how important it is. The short answer in terms of funding is the state was due for $17.5 million, the county due for $17.5 million. The feds pick up the rest of the $88 million project. So at the state level, Shelley and I really combined on this in this year's budget. The state, I would say over the years, I always remind state officials, DEC commissioners, this bill's gonna come due. The state share of this, you're gonna owe this, to make sure that there's money there. So we came into this year's budget and, before, the state said, well, we're gonna do the money, but the state really hadn't figured out which different pots the money is gonna come from. And they were gonna do some from the Bond Act, some from there, 5 different places. And so Shelley and I, if I can speak for both of us, we didn't like the sound of that. And so what we did in each of our houses, we put in our one house budgets, which is our counter budget to the governor, and we were working with DEC on this. The whole $17.5 million in the state budget, not coming from different pots, all in the state budget in one place, so that there's no delay because of state funding, that the Mamaroneck doesn't have to worry, the feds don't have to worry, and that's what we did. We got it in the budget, signed, sealed, and delivered. And so a lot of thought went into the strategy of that and understanding the importance of Mamaroneck, if that be very, very clear. In terms of future funding, absolutely looking for additional funding. One thing, and then I think I hand it to Shelley to do some other things on, we could both say on the state stuff, but one of the things, the Army Corps plan is not the whole thing. It can't be the whole thing, and that's been the concern from a lot of people in Mamaroneck for a long time anyway. But since we've had more recent storms, in any one of these watersheds in Westchester County, I always say to people, if you're planning to mitigate based upon studies that you did 15 years ago, add 10%. It's not going to do enough. And so the Army Corps used to say, well, if you're going to make any changes, we're going to go back to square one, we're going to another 30-year delay. And in the last year and a half, and we've been some of the meetings with the Army Corps, they sort of have changed their tune a little. And in fact, right now, they're taking the numbers from IDA and recalibrating some of the work that they're going to be doing as part of the Army Corps plan. So that's important, to acknowledge with the Army Corps that it can't just be what they planned for 15 years ago. I, for one, think we should be looking at some of the upstream things that were discarded by the Army Corps plan. We will see. So why don't I hand this over to Shelley? I could go on and on, but it is so important, and it certainly. I just say this: I was the mayor of a flood community, the city of Rye, also a downstream community, as was Paul here in Mamaroneck. So the frustration about what upstream communities are less interested in, that we're the victims of, totally get it, and have worked really on all the watersheds on the Sound Shore that I represent. But this is the #1 flood victim community, Village of Mamaroneck, #1 priority.
Let me just add to what's, and Steve and I obviously work very closely. I'm in the Senate, he's in the Assembly. We fought to get this 17.5 specifically designated in the enacted budget, so that nobody walked away and said, well, we really weren't sure the state really had the money. So we got that in there working with DEC. But I want to go back to this group and the importance of this group to me. I think that, you know, I've been a big supporter of basically small industry in all of our Westchester communities. But in Mamaroneck, you are central to the strength of this place. And I can understand the frustration that sometimes, because you don't vote, as you say, but you're paying a huge share of the property tax, your voice is not heard. I just want to assure you that our being here is a commitment to making sure your voice is heard in every way where we can be helpful. We're not the municipality, we're not the Village of Mamaroneck, but we do talk to them all the time. But what we do is deal with DEC and all the other state agencies that are into this flooding conversation. And it was ironic, in the last conversation we had with DEC about something, we said, listen, there is no place in Westchester more important than Mamaroneck when you're dealing with every issue dealing with water. Because there's a sense of resentment in Mamaroneck, and we were very clear with this, that nobody paid attention to how bad it was until Ida. And now everybody knows how bad it is. So I think we have really gotten it on the map of the people who are in charge of funding flood mitigation projects, that Mamaroneck is our priority, and that it has to be the state's priority. So I think we've gotten that message loud and clear. I am working as someone who represents Harrison and Purchase and other places to force municipalities to work with each other. It hasn't always worked very well, but the water knows no boundaries, and this upstream, downstream problem, we've got to have a better solution. I actually had a bill that Governor Cuomo vetoed to force municipalities to talk to each other about how to deal with flooding before Ida. That was based on Sandy. But we need to, and we are trying to get upstream municipalities to deal with the impact of water there, water retention, that is ultimately hurting downstream communities. So I've been working with, I'm working with Chris Burdick with SUNY Purchase on the water there, the airport, the village of the town of Harrison. Yesterday I saw we got them money to improve their flood mitigation. All places where water ultimately comes downstream. We have to be on the same page, and we are fighting with each of these communities to get funding to have projects that, as Steve said, reflect newer studies, not the old studies, because the world has changed really. Ida was a wake-up call that we absolutely have to do something quite more drastic. And the last thing I just want to say is, on the Army Corps, we have worked with Mayor Murphy closely to force the feds and the Army Corps to sort of no more delays. As Steve said, there was this conversation, well, the data is a little old, we need to revisit it. Yes, there need to be some modifications, perhaps based on more recent data, but we cannot wait, so we have to move ahead. And then we have to correct as we go. So I think we are trying very hard to bump up the Mamaroneck's visibility at the state level on these flooding issues, and particularly the impact on not only residential, but small industry, like all of you, because we know you stay here, you've stayed here, many of you, for many, many years and committed to this community, and we need you to stay here. We need to make it work. So we want to be partners in working with you on that.
Give it to Catherine, who also got $17.5 million from the town.
So let me back up for a minute also. One thing that, and thank you for the nice introduction. One thing that you should know about me is in the city of Rye, I was a small business owner for almost 23 years. I had a store on Purchase Street. I remember March 2nd, 2007. I remember April 15th, 2007. I had 5 feet of water in my basement, my business. Everything that I had in my store. I had one just like it in the basement. Both of those storms, I lost, about $100,000 worth of merchandise, which may or may not sound like a lot to you. It was an absolute fortune to me as a small business owner. And, I had a very small policy. First storm, I was able to recoup $25,000. When that second storm hit 6 weeks later, I called my insurance company and they said, "Oh, you're out of luck. That's for a calendar year. You've already tapped into it. No, you are out of luck." I ended up going on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and making $50,000, and that, helped keep me in business. And I know I'm not suggesting that all of you go on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But I would just say, I don't listen to rain the same way. So as now somebody who's been in county government for, this is my 10th year, and before that I served 6 years on the city council. Flooding has been very much about what I have been working on and what I know is a crucial element to the health and well-being of our community, and that includes the business community. Another little interesting side note about me, I also helped revitalize we had a Chamber of Commerce when I first opened in 1996 that was really about collecting for a sidewalk sale once a year. And Steve and I first met in '98, coming together with other business owners to talk about the issues of the downtown, and I recognized quickly that what we really needed was a strong, centralized organization to really represent the business community's interests to City Hall. And just like you, a lot of our small businesses were owned by people that didn't necessarily live in Rye, but that paid a tremendous amount in property taxes. So I'm with you 100%. Now let me tell you what the county does as far as flooding. So back, during when Andy Spano actually was county executive, that was the first foray into setting up a fund to help communities with flood mitigation, to help pay for it. And the county has a planning department, and we also have a stormwater advisory board, and the county has the planning board. So municipalities, the expectation is that in the watersheds in Westchester, that the municipalities will not just come with their own projects, but will talk to their neighbors. And as Stephen Shelley mentioned, we completely understand that, you have to look at these things not like a waterbed where you push down water here and, something else pops up. You have to be, very cognizant of your neighbors. So we actually look at applications for funding from municipalities. When they're working together, that's a stronger application. That's showing that there's this understanding of the implications to the communities and both of them coming together, or multiple communities coming together and saying, we support this project. That pushes it up. I am now the ex officio to that stormwater advisory board. And when I was on my first term as a county legislator, we passed the stormwater reconnaissance plans, which is a list of all the projects for every municipality. We send a questionnaire out once a year to the planners and managers and all of the administrative people for a municipality to say, tell us what the flooding issues are, and to create this list. And then the next step is that they, again, get their ducks in a row, and the county will provide up to a 50% share of the local obligation. As Steve mentioned earlier, there's, the state is splitting with the federal government on it. So when it comes to the Army Corps project, a couple of years ago, I added $11 million for our that stormwater fund just for the Army Corps project. George Latimer basically said, "Here, hold my beer," and added more money to that, so it's up to $12 million. And then in addition to that, we did add another $5 million this year to be used for municipalities. The town of Mamaroneck is actually, will be tapping into that for additional studies. I want to just mention two things, because since we mentioned the town of Mamaroneck, the Waverly Avenue Bridge. You may wonder, what does the county have to do with the Waverly Avenue Bridge? Well, the town of Mamaroneck came to us, this is a flood mitigation project, it's a culvert that is being expanded. So we have paid 50% of that project. And so that is how the county is involved in that. I'll stop there and we'll go to the next question.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Can I just throw one more thing in as it relates to recent events? After Ida, Shelley and I reached out to DEC, and DEC is playing a much bigger role than they used to in all the watersheds in Westchester. And what they're doing, including this watershed, is they're going as an additional assist to municipalities and taking all of the studies that have been done over the years and having their own consultants review them and are offering advice or tweaks to try and make sure we're getting the best out of the dollar there. In terms of the intermunicipal thing, I used to be on the county flood action task force after the flood in 2007. And one of the principles of that was for projects that the county was going to be involved in, you can't do a project that benefits you if it's going to have a negative impact on another community. And that's an important discipline on all flood projects to make sure that you're doing no harm to others. Someone could be solving their flooding problems upstream at the expense of Mamaroneck. We can't let that happen.
Thank you. The next question is related to infrastructure. So we all know that the people in this room had between 4 inches and 12 feet of water on their property during Hurricane Ida. The effects of the rain were exacerbated by years of neglect and inadequate preparation on the part of the village due to aging and ineffective stormwater drainage at the intersections of Fenimore and Waverly. Floods routinely that whole section, and the storm drains bubble up with less than 2 inches of rain. So our question is, can you help the village find funding for a comprehensive infrastructure study of the stormwater system in the industrial area? And once the study has been done, could you assist in finding funding to actually get the work done?
Yes.
You can start.
So the $5 million that I added to the budget this year is specifically for studies, because I agree 100% that our stormwater system really needs to be evaluated. And we need to have rain gauges. There's a lot of information that that municipalities have to collect. So there is, when the village, if they want to do that, they can certainly put in for their studies, and I would hope that that would be something that they would be looking at doing. I do speak with the elected officials in the village, and I have a good relationship with all of them, which is, in this recently, that seems to be a challenge, but I maintain that given that I have a good relationship with all of them, because for you, it's really important that we can, have real trust that we're all working together for the good of the community. So that is something that has certainly, I made it sure that all my municipalities knew about this new funding source, and that they come to us for funding.
Let me just add that, the answer for us, and I want to speak for Steve, is yes. We will help when the village asks or when you ask. And then we have to work with the village. But, like Karen said, it's our job to fight for you as people here. So if there's money that we can get on the table and the village wants to be the applicant, because they have to be the applicant, then we will absolutely fight. And we have been on numerous calls since Ida with DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, which really is in charge of much of this flood water mitigation mitigation efforts to get as much money as we can, and we'll keep the fight up. So if the village, which is the applicant in most of these things, the municipality, wants money for a study, or if we need to be your allies in advocating and they seek money for a study, I know that we will be partners in trying to get that done.
In the Environmental Bond Act that passed last year, there was a proposal that was my proposal to add a stormwater grant program to the Bond Act, and it passed, and it's $250 million for stormwater grants. DEC is working through the regulations right now, and so that really has these kinds of issues exactly in mind. So there should be fresh money for the village. Going back to 2015, Shelley and I both worked on the creation of clean water grants coming out of the Environmental Facilities Corporation, and Mamaroneck has gotten some grant funding from that program. It's that deals with drinking water and with sanitary sewer. Sanitary sewer systems are definitely impacted by flood events, and so that's an important additional source of funding. And in terms of the more global thing, in terms of planning, Environmental Facilities Corporation has a planning grant program the village can apply for to help support a planning grant for these sorts of activities.
But just how it works operationally, you know, if you get the village to say, we want to apply for this money, and they start the process, then they ask us either for a letter of support, get on the phone with these people in Albany, whatever they need, and sort of, we don't just write a letter and then disappear. We are willing to be on the phone in every call to get them to the finish line. That's what we tried on the other ones, and that's what we've tried in the surrounding communities to impact, as well as I just would point out that we have a proposal to change the state's building code so that new residential and other buildings have to take into account the impact of flooding. So you're going to build a big apartment house with a lot of water use somewhere north, and it's ultimately going to have impact here. We want the building code to have to incorporate consideration of potential impact on flooding on buildings. So we'll continue to fight for that.
All right, this question is for Legislator Parker. In 2 weeks, approximately 2 weeks, the Waverly Avenue Bridge will be closed, and you did touch on this. It is a town of Mamaroneck project, but it will be a village of Mamaroneck traffic nightmare. The IABC has made a request to the town to let us be an advisory group to address the traffic problem and make some suggestions. There has been a less than enthusiastic response to that request. We feel there should be additional police presence required at the beginning of the project. The municipalities would like to wait a couple of weeks and see how bad it gets before they do anything. So our question, our specific question is, what is the county's role in the bridge replacement project?
Funding, really just funding.
Okay, so it's not a county, yeah. Okay, so I want you to say that on the record, on the record.
Our role is again to help fund and make these projects possible, but the town of Mamaroneck is really, they're in the driver's seat.
How long is the bridge supposed to be out for?
We'll have to ask an official from the town.
Yeah, I think it's a year.
Yeah.
So you can't go home.
They said a year. So our follow-up question is the bridge on Halsted Avenue. Now, we're not sure if that's an MTA bridge. The county doesn't really own too many bridges, so I don't know that. I don't think it's a county bridge.
Are you talking about the street bridge, or are you talking about the railroad bridge on Halsted Avenue?
We're talking about the railroad bridge. Isn't that the bridge that we?
Well, that's one of them, but it turns out that the county bridge, the street bridge that the county owns, also its part was dammed up a tremendous amount of the water.
Okay, which is not part of the ACE plan, the Army Corps plan. So I guess the question is, could the county take a look at that and see what improvements the county could recommend to ensure it doesn't become an obstruction for getting water out of the choke point?
Because every time we ask somebody, they say, well, they're doing a study. Well, I can hear all these studies, but the water, if you were here looking at it, the water was cavitating on the bridge that they just fixed on Halsted Avenue.
Happy to look in and see what the status is. I think we've actually have bonded already for some design work with that. I mean, we've done a lot of work coordinating with the village on a number of bridges, as well as the town of Rye. And I feel like that one
Does that bridge belong to the town of Rye?
You know,
It's in the town of Mamaroneck.
Yeah.
Bridge, and it's on Halsted Avenue, which is County Road. It's kind of,
It's like
You-
the
you
bridge on
can't
Church
extend
Street.
it.
The towns are responsible for bridges and cemeteries. The villages are not.
The bridge on Church
So-
Street.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure that bridge, it might be an MTA bridge. but
I
It's definitely not a village in the county. Like I said, the county doesn't own a lot of bridges.
But they fixed that one on Halsted Avenue, the street.
They,
Where the river
not to
goes
say they
underneath.
can't participate in funding and repairing. I'm just saying,
Gotcha.
as far as ownership goes, cemeteries and bridges are usually the town. Now, the town of Rye and the village of Mamaroneck, they made an agreement on some of the bridges, because the town just did the one in Rhinebeck, I forget what.
I would
I was
say
there
that
for the ribbon cutting and
No,
I'm
sir, no,
forgetting.
sir.
Thank you, I feel bad.
there's no logic to bridge ownership,
Yeah.
I think some are owned by 2 municipalities, some are owned, I think there's one that's owned by 3. But none of us remember, we need the deeds.
It stems from the fact that towns were created by the state, and so villages are created by the people. So there were, 100 years ago, large Smog Village, there were referendums to create little villages, and the town is a creature of the state of New York. So, and that's why I think cemeteries and bridges remain within the jurisdiction of the
So
town.
here's what I will do. I'm happy to look into it and let you know what's happening with the Halsted Avenue Bridge and who's doing it. And
Yeah.
get back to you, at least you'll have that answer.
Exactly.
And if there's a follow-up, my email is parker@westchesterlegislators.com, and we will follow it up from there.
Perfect. So the next question is also about bridges, but these are the MTA bridges. So we have 2 Metro North bridges, one on Mamaroneck Avenue and one on Fenimore, that frequently get jammed with trucks. There doesn't seem to be any appetite on the part of the village to address this problem or to approach the MTA about correcting the problem. So we are concerned that all of this crashing into the bridge is weakening the bridge structure, and we're concerned that obviously more stuck trucks means more traffic. So what we'd like to know, if you could address the MTA on our behalf, looking for a more workable solution to the problem.
Well, let me just say, before I came here, I drove to Revere Road. I took a left, where Steve and I went into warfare with the MTA over their cutting of that adjacent property to those homeowners with no notice. Some of you remember, at the end of that road, right down here to the left, they basically cold cut what was their backyard one day without any notice. These people woke up with a train in their backyard, they didn't really know. And Steve and I spent a year, and to the credit of the county, and not to the credit of the MTA, in my opinion, we ultimately came up with a solution where trees were planted. My only point is, we are happy to fight with the MTA. We actually did a bill to force them to talk to a community before they cut trees on their own property unless they have to do it for line safety, which the governor vetoed, but because the MTA opposed it. So the one thing I will say is that the MTA will say, which I know because I've dealt with it on other bridges, our focus is not on the bridges we own, our focus is on the trains, subways, and buses we own. That being said, I'm happy, and I'm sure Steve will be too, to raise with the MTA that this needs review and we want attention. Can't promise what the result will be.
I would also say that these bridge hit situations are not just MTA's issue, that it also is sort of shared with who owns the road. And so in some cases, I've dealt with these in other communities, in some cases you're gonna get state DOT involved, there's signage issues, you can put flashing lights, all sorts of warnings. The reality is that you could put 8 million flashing things and people still are driving stupid, and especially people who rent trucks. That's a part of the problem, is people that are truck driving all the time, and they still run into these bridges no matter what you do. But certainly, I've dealt with these in the past, happy to help, and whether the county too, to combine, improve some of the signage and decrease the number of incidents that happen this way. It's very frustrating.
We just did a bill requiring commercial trucks to use GPS, actually require them for the bigger trucks, that they have to use GPS. I think it should us as well, so that we can minimize this, hitting the bridge problem with the bigger trucks that don't seem to know about parkways and railroad bridges and other things, so we are trying to address it, but on the local level, we can be helpful with it.
And I will give a shout out again to the county executive, George Latimer, has been very vocal on this issue and really advocating to the governor and really making it very clear that we need to change
Signage and
Yeah.
lights and, so we're happy to follow.
Thank you. The last group question is about the New York State Climate Act. This act is among the most ambitious climate laws in the nation, requiring New York to reduce economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions 40% by 2030. Is that true? That's a lot. Okay. And no less than 85% by 2050 from 1990 levels. Can you let us know how the new climate law and the supplemental state electrification legislation and regulations will impact new commercial construction projects as well as existing buildings as we plan to invest in improving our commercial properties?
Well, just on the what they call Build Electric, what's it called? The Build Electric Buildings, New Electric Buildings Act that we just worked on, and whether it's gonna come to pass, that is very focused on new construction, not existing buildings being retrofitted or things like that. So, very mindful of the financial impact on existing business owners. This is focused on building a whole new building that's a commercial building or a residential building. There's a time delay of the implementation based on how large the building is. We can get the details and share that so that people know it's not there yet. So I think there's a lot of mindfulness that these strong climate goals pose challenges to businesses, and that we have to figure out a way. One of the reasons through the Environmental Bond Act that people passed was to put aside money to assist in some of these efforts. So there will be money down the road as we move to try to meet these climate change requirements. Now, we already had Con Ed with the moratorium on gas hookups, which, has been a challenge, but many of you probably dealt with. But as we move forward, we're gonna need enough electricity in our supply grid to meet the needs of additional buildings. We're very mindful that we're trying to encourage new creation of electricity. So we have to have enough to meet what we are anticipating as we're pushing people towards use of electricity as a better way. So there is money going to be on the table, and we're glad to share some of the details of the new bills once they get signed, and how the impact will be on commercial business.
So I'd say, Shelley mentioned the moratorium, natural gas moratorium has been in existence in Westchester for, I think, 3 years now.
Right.
I've done a lot of troubleshooting for businesses that had problems navigating that with Con Ed, and so some new businesses, and you're building something totally new, they've been generally going all electric. We have some businesses that had some natural gas and needed an adjustment and try to get some flexibility out of Con Ed, and some success on some of those. I just say more broadly, if you experience the smoke that we experienced last week, if you experience in April, we had it one day 91 degrees in April. Global warming is here and is, when you had that smoke last week, it's sort of like, where do you escape to? Nowhere. So we're going to have to transition to cleaner forms of electricity production and use. One issue that I'm involved with trying to facilitate is electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The electric cars are going to be more available. The prices are going to come down. All the manufacturers are moving in that direction. And but people are not going to want to buy the cars if they don't feel they can charge. And so that's one piece that the state has to play a big role. Through the Infrastructure Act that the federal government passed, there's money for businesses, there's money for governments, There's money for homeowners to do these kinds of transitions. What job that Shelley and I have is to make sure that New York State is aggressive about accessing the federal funds that are available and get that to you. And I know the county's been very good at accessing federal money already and turning that into creative programs. The county board, Catherine, Georgia, is doing a very good job on that, so.
Okay, any more?
Oh, I understand. So now we go back to flooding. And I bring flooding up because with climate change, as Steve was saying, we are seeing more severe storms. The moisture in the air, that when it drops and it rains 8 inches in a few hours, that's when we're really in trouble. Recently, I was at a meeting in the city of Rye with one of the consultants they had hired to take a look at all of their flood studies that they had done over the last number of years and look at IDA data. And the most startling thing I heard at that meeting was the 100-year storm that we had talked about in 2007 and 8. That now the 100-year storm, well, that's really a 77-year storm. So the frequency is going up, and that's really significant. So we have to be looking at what we can do to hopefully try to mitigate some of this. So it does mean that we have to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Now here's some good news that I heard 2 hours before I came to this meeting. We had a company in called CleanPath, and they are putting in a transmission line that will connect renewable energy from New York State higher up. Believe it or not, northern part of New York State is close to being at the levels that we are aspiring to by 2050, because they have much more reliance with hydropower from Canada and everything else. They are really relying on renewable energy right now. So this transmission line will help bring some of that down to the New York area, which we are part of that. There isn't, Con Ed's not working with them, and it's not going directly into Con Ed, but we're going to get some benefit. As Shelley was saying, it'll help reduce the reliance on fossil fuels within the grid, and so that will be a very good thing. It's going to be a project that once they've received some approvals already from the PSC, they have to go through a process with DEC, but once that happens, 6 months they're in, and we'll have that project completed. So that's pretty exciting. On another level, for the county, one of the things that we are recognizing is that we have to help small business, and particularly small business when it comes to rental units. You know, if you are a landlord and you have, under 10 units for housing, you're going to have to make some upgrades. Those can be expensive. So we are allocating $25,000 per unit to landlords to help make those switches to electrify those units, which is very helpful. And if any of you are in the contracting business, tell your clients that money is available. They can apply to the county for that. But we will be looking at other ways that, again, understanding that we've got to just, make these changes, and we're looking at ways that we can make it as painless as possible.
And you would go to questions from.
We are, now we are done. That concludes our pre-planned questions, so we can open up to the floor. So I'll give this back to you guys. I call on people, anyone who wants to ask a question. Let them rip.
My name is Spencer Pops, and I've been here all my life. I can't tell you how many times.
How long is that? No.
70 years. 70 years.
25 years.
How many years you been here?
Not that long.
70 years. We've heard so many politicians tell us how they were going to help us.
Yeah.
Well, I live next to the Mamaroneck River, and I'm going to tell you, there hasn't been one change at all. Now, the biggest problem, and everybody in this room probably knows it, are two bridges. The one going over Boston Avenue and the MTA bridge. They are the plug in the bathtub. We're the bathtub. We get everything's water.
Yeah.
If they can't open that up, I mean, all the studies aren't keeping up with the water. And that's not your fault, that's Mother Nature doing her thing. So the other end of it is, we were here for a meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers,
Yeah.
and they said, we're going to lower the water level 2.8 feet. That's great, except for, we got 14 feet. So now we're gonna have 11.2 or whatever, it's not enough. So what I'm saying is, somebody has to take the step forward and say, hey, listen, we need to get these projects underway. You know, there's so, and it's not your fault, but there's so many studies. The studies, I think, in some ways are holding back the projects from moving forward. They need to get going, because, as you said, this water is gonna keep coming.
Yes.
This is a fact of life. And the rain that we've
Got
gotten,
one drain.
yeah, the rain that we have gotten lately has been like no other rain in history for this area. And especially, like you said, 8 inches comes down and we end up with it, we're swimming. We are swimming. So as good as the studies are, I think the main incentive should be to get the projects underway. And the Army Corps of Engineers, when they first said they were gonna be in charge, I said, well, maybe they'll move. But they seem to be having as many problems as everybody else, trying to get a foothold and get going.
Well, finally, I don't want to cut you off, but finally, really because of Ida, and you were here, not to hook up
Oh, I was here,
politics.
don't worry.
No, I know you were here, but the next day when Schumer came, we walked around with him on Mamaroneck Avenue, and some businesses basically said, don't come into my store. I was with one of them. Don't come in, you promised this, it never happened. It is now going to happen. I forget the politics. Ida was the change agent. So it's not a study, it's a project that's gonna actually happen. It's not enough.
But do we have a date?
Well,
I
don't
think,
know
I
the
think,
date.
I think that's the real deal. Do we have a date when we're gonna get started?
Okay,
Well, they're starting the bridge in 2 weeks.
July 1st.
But,
So,
but the
but
thing
it's
is,
not-
but that bridge
It's
is not the
Yeah.
real problem.
So-
The real problem is 2 bridges over there.
I share your frustration. I was here with Senator Schumer in 2007, you know. and-
Me too.
Yeah, but here's one of the dynamics. The Army Corps, they probably study hundreds of projects across the country. For every 50 or 100 projects they study, most of them never happen. Mamaroneck, they said years ago, this one really needs to be done. Unfortunately, then the prior administration in Washington stopped it when it was moving forward. And after Ida, Senator Schumer said, no way, and restarted it. And the only reason, honestly, that we're going again now is because Senator Schumer really rattled some people in Washington to make sure that they restarted the project. So it's going to be happening, but I think that the other reality is the water level is going to get worse. And we need to do the projects that are on the books now, but we need to come up with other projects, because the thing, if they do everything that the Army Corps plan has, it's not gonna be enough. And that's just the bad news, the reality of what's happening. All these storms are worse. Peggy Jackson, who you all know, I asked her, how many inches did you get in 2007? It was like 64 inches. In Ida, she had 86 inches, something like that, maybe an inch or two off. But that's true for everybody in all these storms.
Can I ask a question? It seems like the Army Corps of Engineers wants to do one project and move on to the next. Why can't they do multiple projects? Why can't they be working on this area and this area?
They are going to be, but one thing, and at the Army Corps of Engineers meeting that we had at the Emlyn like a year ago, I complained about it and followed up since then with Senator Schumer's office with the Army Corps. They were going to take like 3 years to recalibrate the numbers. And I basically said at the meeting, that's too long. Can't you crunch the numbers quicker so that we can get multiple projects going sooner? And that is what we're pushing for.
Can I just say one thing? Is that, to your point, that's, however good it is and good it's starting, it's not enough. We're saying we want to help the village apply for every other funding to do projects. Studies if necessary, projects if they're there. So there is money on the table now. So this is the moment to go. And also, I think we have gotten Mamaroneck sort of a really laser focused from the state DEC. They understand this feeling that you're talking about. That's what we conveyed in our last call with them.
I think everybody in America has the feeling I have.
I know, but they hadn't heard it, and we have tried our best to make sure they do.
Thank you.
Next,
everybody's talking about all the studies and everything, you know, we probably had 50 or 60 years of building upstream that nobody paid attention to, and that's why we get a lot more water. Not so much that we're getting more rain, we are, yeah, but the volume, if that stream is clean, not just from here to our border, if those stream beds were cleaned from there up, the water would have gotten out a lot faster, a lot quicker to the bottom. But with none of them doing maintenance upstream either, it's not gonna help us very much if they don't do the same thing.
It's not
So the
just-
maintenance, the other counties should have to maintain that stream bed.
So the county had a flood study done in the 1920s, and they had an overlay map of the county of all the areas that were porous. And year after year, more stuff gets built and upstream that is flowing down here. The water has no place to go. That's a contributing factor, and this is another reason why we have to have the mitigation steps. The projects have to gear up to what the new water levels are going to be. It's not getting any easier, and the water runoff is getting worse. It's not a stagnant situation. So what you're saying is totally true.
But here's the problem, the Revere Road Bridge, grew up on Revere Road, the bridge right there, they did all the concrete work, they left the trap rock. There used to be 10 feet from the concrete to the ceiling, there's 4 feet now. So that was never cleaned or anything, so,
And whose responsibility for that underneath that bridge is?
well, that's right in the town, it's on the town borderline, that bridge that goes underneath. The other side of the thruway is the town of Mamaroneck, well, that's it, part runs right through the middle of it. But every time I've gone to a meeting, nobody's addressed that bridge, and from there up the duck pond, they did dredge, but underneath that bridge and there down, well,
So one of the things that you can advocate for is that Mamaroneck reaches out to the other municipalities that are part of the Long Island Sound watershed and ask them to sit down at the table for what's called LISWIC, the Long Island Sound Watershed Intermunicipal Council. We had a couple of meetings in the end of 2021 and 2022. In total, I think 3 meetings. And I thought the municipalities, it was at my request that they come back and they try to start engaging with each other to talk about things like a comprehensive plan and, you know, putting into someone's comprehensive plan, like in White Plains, the problem that is downstream. And in the course of the communities coming together, there was no real sense of urgency to do this. Now, I'm as I said, the ex officio to the Stormwater Advisory Board, which is making the decision on who gets funding. So I really can't be that person. It really has to be the municipalities themselves that are willing to do this. And I would say if they hear it from all of you, that would be really helpful, because I really think this is a way that that conversation will be happening on a regular basis. I attended the planning board meeting last week for Westchester County, and you'll be happy to know your village, the village of Mamaroneck, came and went through their draft comprehensive plan. The number 1 priority was flooding. But it was also said at that meeting that the city of White Plains, they're doing a comprehensive study, but they're not bringing it to the county planning board. And I think that that's a problem for you, know, and I can tell you the chairman of the board, of the planning board, is not too happy with the city of White Plains that they're not coming in and doing just as the village did. Because we do see it in terms of all of our municipalities have to be thinking about this. This is an issue that is not just Mamaroneck, it's not just Ron, it is, you know, out of the municipalities in Westchester, I really don't know one at this point in time that isn't concerned that, you know, they're seeing so many changes to infrastructure. Again, I think Ida was a wake-up call to communities that have never had flooding before. They recognize something is different. It is climate change.
So how do we go about doing that?
I would say one thing is, to answer that question, while we get state money and we get county money, ultimately the decision of what projects communities choose to pursue are made at the municipal level. And so municipalities do studies and then they make decisions to go get money or not go get money. It's very important for, as Catherine was saying, municipalities have to be talking to each other and do projects that have multi-community benefit. But the state really does not decide, nor does the county, what we're gonna do, project A versus project B. That's really not what our levels of government do. What DEC is trying to do is to help move this process along by giving municipalities, here's some outside consulting advice on, you did these studies, well now we think you should do the projects in this sequence. These projects are more effective. So I think the state is trying to play a big role in accelerating the process through DEC. But local governments ultimately decide what projects they want to pin their futures on and what projects they put in the back burner. My frustration, having dealt with this for many, many years, is I see studies that were done, not just in Mamaroneck and other watersheds, other communities, studies done years ago, and then you don't get a flood for a while, and everyone on that municipal board forgets that the flood's gonna come again, and it doesn't become a priority. You need to do the projects that you did good studies for, and get them done and lower the risk for people.
But I'm just asking, because I assume it's truthful, that you've met with the village leadership.
And Army Corps.
And the Army Corps,
Yeah,
but
that's
in
it,
terms of hearing this voice, that we need more attention to the issue.
Yeah.
You've raised that correctly.
Absolutely, yeah. Anyone else, one more question?
I just have one quick question. Do our state and county representatives, yourselves, have the authority to force the building departments that are upstream to have flood retention like we have in our own village? Flood retention in our own village is ridiculous, but we have it. My neighbor built a house, he had to hold 8,000 gallons of water. We live on the water. When the tide comes up, it fills up, it's ridiculous. Why can't our state and our county representatives force these other municipalities to follow the same rules that we have in our own flood-infested area? It just makes no sense to me. They can let their gutters and leaders go out to the road, and what do? They go to the road, they go to the creek, and they come to Mamaroneck. If you can't do it, nobody can do it. So I guess my question is, how do we go about making the county and making the towns and villages upstream have to follow the same rules as we do?
Well, without being too sort of wonky, thank you, legalistic. So New York State, you might have seen during the whole fight we had over the housing compact where the governor proposed that the state could override local zoning, and most people in our community said, no, we do not want that. We want our local people to decide zoning. We have this local rule, which really dominates, so that zoning decisions, building decisions, code decisions are based on decision of locally elected people. Now, there are times, for example, we have a state building code, and municipalities have to adopt it, and it gives guidance. What we are trying to do is what you said, is strengthen the code so that upstream communities have to at least consider the impact when they authorize a house or an apartment building on what the downstream impact will be. So, we have done, Steve and I did at least one bill on this. We will do more. We bump up against, very honestly, people saying like, what do you mean? You can't tell us what to do. We elected Joe Blow, our mayor, and our village town board, and they'll decide our local building issues. Because flooding, though, is a whole different thing in my book. And that's why after Sandy, I proposed this. Because everybody was getting screwed by the upstream water. And that's going to keep being the fact unless we communicate with each other. Now, I will say, in some of the communities I've represented, I have gone to the mayor and said, nobody is responding to the other municipalities who are asking you not to build like this. And I didn't get very far, but we are bumping up against this concept of local rule, which makes it hard to do what is a common sense solution that you pointed out, and we gotta keep fighting that. But we're gonna need people to say, it's okay if somebody wants to supersede our local building and zoning code because of the effects downstream.
Well, the people in the village of Mamaroneck will.
I know, but they're at the end of the stream.
We're at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah,
You go to White Plains now, there's a building in every corner.
I
Massive.
know.
Massive.
I represent all of White Plains, I know,
Michael?
everywhere.
Towards 6:30, I just want to say, it was about 5 or 6 months ago, Shelley Merrick came to visit us at Murphy Bros. And we told her about the Industrial Area Business Coalition. And she said, hey, I'd love to meet with your group, and I'll bring Steve and Catherine. So I want to thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. I know, being involved with the Chamber of Commerce, that you're all very accessible, and we're delighted to have you here.
Yeah.
We just want to bring the voice of the business community together to talk about what's bothering us and see if we can not criticize and condemn or complain about stuff, but get stuff done in the village and
That's
the
what we
business.
want to do.
So, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd also say, we don't need a meeting. You have a problem, call any of us up. We are available and we'll get right to an individual issue that comes up. We thrive on doing that, so that's our job. We want to do it well, so.
I'm leaving
Thank
my
you.
cards here, anyone, please feel free to call. And the other thing is, let's follow up though, in the ways that, particularly on looking for funding, when the village identifies the next post-ACE project they wanna do, then we'll get right on the phone with DEC and start to, and I just would say the county and George have done things that are not in their responsibility, let's just put it that way. It is the state's problem. It's less the county's problem. And Catherine and George and the whole county board have gone beyond their charge